If you frequent some of the same gadget websites as I do, and I'm sure you do, over the last few years you can't have failed to come across the wave of nostalgia around 1980s computers. There have been quite a few crowdfunding campaigns launched to bring back computers from people's childhood. I think it's been a combination of these, along with watching the TV show Halt and Catch Fire, when it came to me that I'd never owned a Commodore 64. You see, in the 80s, most children in the UK had either a Spectrum or a Commodore 64, or if your parents were teachers and a bit well off, you had a BBC-B. I owned a Spectrum 48K and then moved to a Spectrum 128 later on, and then the majority of the 80s for me were pretty much all Spectrum until in the late 80s I moved to an Atari ST and then a DOS 386 PC, and from there it gets a lot less interesting. So I've never owned a Commodore 64, but there's really no reason I can't own one now. I mean, there's plenty on eBay, and in addition people sell SD card readers full of the Commodore 64's back catalogue, so you can just plug it in and play all the games that you missed out on in one simple go. Even if I find out most of the games are too simple to enjoy anymore, it still take me hours to go through each of them, so cost per minute of entertainment is not bad at all nowadays. So I started off looking for a suitable machine, and then I came across the SX-64. Now, this is a machine I'd forgotten existed. The Commodore SX-64 is a luggable Commodore 64 all-in-one with a built-in screen. It was the first portable computer with a colour display. Now, there are benefits to me for this one over a normal Commodore 64 because it's a lot neater. Rather than have a spaghetti of cables going to the monitor and a disk drive and a power brick, they're all built in. It's easier to pack away. It can be connected up to a normal external monitor though, and it runs all the normal Commodore 64 games and has a cartridge slot which is useful for fast loaders to speed up disk access. And the people making SD card readers also make a model that will work with the SX-64. Now, obviously, the SX-64, there are a lot less of them made than there were Commodore 64s, and they cost a lot more. So people on eBay tend to ask a lot of money for them. But if you hold your nerve like I did, wait a couple of months, you should be able to get hold of one at a pretty cheap price. This one cost about $250 all in, delivered to the UK, which I didn't think was that bad. It was advertised as being a little bit faulty, but that's what we're here for. We're going to try and fix those faults. Now, let's have a look around it. So that was a cartridge slot on the top there. I'll just give you a tour of the machine. So it's a very heavy thing. The handle folds underneath to become a stand. Now there's little clips either side on the handle that hold that in place, stop it falling down. Now the clip on the right hand side on this one's a little bit stiff, the left one is fine. Those are things that are often broken off or not working properly when you see them in the adverts. So the fact they're working on this one is a good thing. In fact, this is a pretty decent one all round. The keyboard holds on the front with two clips there. Quite often one or two of those are broken off. Now you'll see there's a gap in the top of the machine. This intrigued me to start with. There was going to be a model with two disk drives released, but they never actually came out officially anyway. People have done modifications, but that's what that gap's for there, a second disk drive or storage. We've got controls for the monitor. We've got a 5-inch colour monitor. Again, of course, we can put the images on a full-size screen, but it's got this built-in monitor as well. Now, there are two big things that attracted me to this particular machine. Number one, it came with a keyboard cable. Doesn't sound like a big deal, but the keyboard cable is often missing, and nobody manufactures new ones of those anymore. And the machine itself, the case looks pretty decent, especially on the side here. You notice these blue caps on the handle slash stand. Those are often missing, and as I say, those clips on the handle mechanism are often snapped off. So as far as the machine goes itself, it's in pretty decent condition externally and visually, but it is suffering from some technical glitches. Now I'll just get into this little packet that I got with it. I also got a printer with this one, believe it or not. I didn't really want a printer, but it came with it. So that's the printer cable, official Commodore printer. There's the power lead. Of course, this one runs on US voltage, so I'm using it through a step-down power converter. And there is the all-important keyboard cable, the world's rarest cable. There's the instruction manual for my printer. I don't think I'll be getting any ribbons for that, but you never know. And there's the manual for the thing itself. So yeah, this particular cable, you wouldn't think it was such a big deal, but it is, because it's a strange shape. It's a normal 25-pin D-sub connector. It's quite thin, and it goes at a weird angle, and it just has to plug into your keyboard here and then back under the machine itself. And I can understand people losing it because you have to do that every time you pack it up. Now, as often happens, as soon as I bought the US one, then a decent deal came up on one in the UK. So I bought that as well. Now, the thing that attracted me to this one is that it seems to be sort of almost new old stock. It still has some of the packing material included with it. Well, the thing it didn't have, though, was the keyboard cable. And I think that was putting people off buying it. So I thought, well, I've got a keyboard cable with the other one, so worst comes to the worst, I'm going to have one good machine. One reason you might want a UK machine over a US one is because there's more games available for the UK one. They won't run often on the US machine due to difference in the video timing. But I thought it'd be a good idea to try and get both of these machines working just for the heck of it. So starting off with the US machine, you can see here we've got a load of nonsense on the screen. If you give it a bang, that disappears and then comes back again. And that's not the only issue. The keyboard is unresponsive. Whatever you type, nothing appears on the screen. However, there is definitely some sort of connection because we can see the lock light comes on there. So it's connected up, but just nothing is happening. So we'll try and fix these things. But let's just go across to the PAL machine because that's also got some issues as well, the UK one. Now, if I can get this machine working, this will probably be the one I use because it does the extra games, it plays extra demos, and I don't have to use it with a step-down power converter. It is, of course, slower than the US machine due to the difference between 50 and 60 Hertz. It loads games fine. The problem with this machine is it doesn't have any sound, which is a bit sad because that was one of the big things on a Commodore 64, the SID chip and all those sound effects. So that's something that needs sorting out. I can't live without that. So luckily there's a load of help online. There's a lot of different people who've put advice up, and it's invaluable in helping me to repair this old machine or these old machines. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to follow some of the things that I've read. I'm going to show you how to do some of these repairs, and hopefully you'll find this useful if you ever decide to pick up your own SX-64. And quite a few of these things also apply to an old Commodore 64 as well. So you have to take a couple of screws out of the back. You slide the sides off, and you of course repeat that on the other side as well. You've got 6 screws in here. You only need to take out the top 3 if you want to take the top off the case. It comes apart really easily, which is good because during the course of making this video I had to take these things apart quite a few times and I got quite quick at it by the end. So take a screw out to either side on the back as well, and then once you've done that, and as I mentioned copied what you did on the other side, you can just lift the lid off. It's a big metal lid. Now I'm going to have to pause things here for a moment because every time I do a video that involves me showing a circuit board or any kind of soldering or anything, I get an influx of comments from electronic engineers telling me that I'm doing everything wrong and it's terrible advice. So just bear that in mind. I'm an idiot. I don't know what I'm doing. Also, you shouldn't touch things that you don't understand, obviously. And also, I'm an amateur, and this is a demonstration of what an amateur can do to repair an old computer. This isn't an expert's guide. This is just showing people that if you're somebody that's got an old machine that isn't working, there are things that even people that are pretty clueless like myself can do to get this up and running. So let's go through those things. Right, first off, we've got the dodgy display. Now this is a very simple fix and a very common problem with the SX-64. There are 2 circuit boards. There's one at the bottom and then this one stood up on the side here. Those 2 are joined together by a little interface in between them. And the sideways circuit board, the standing up one, quite often falls out of a ridge that it's supposed to be in at the bottom, which separates it from the other circuit board. You can see the metal pins, the gold pins on display there. You shouldn't be able to see those things have come apart. So with a bit of finagling and shoving things together and making sure you've got it all right, you can push those together, make sure you can't see any gold sticking out between those, which means the connectors are correctly together, and now we can switch it on again and see what happens when those 2 things are pushed together. Obviously it's never good having a computer with things halfway unplugged, and as you can see here we have got a display that isn't flickering anymore. We've got a keyboard that sort of does most of the letters, although not all of them, so at least something's going on. Get the contact cleaner out. I always use contact cleaner on everything, it's so useful. Spray that on that connector, then put the keyboard plug back in again. After letting it dry, I suppose. I'm not too sure. Again, bad advice. But look, it works. The keyboard works. We've got all the letters displaying now, so that's brilliant. And the display, well, it's no longer doing that thing where it cuts out, but look at the colours, how it flickers, how the letters are flickering in a kind of weird faded way. That's not right at all. I left it on for a few hours and then came back to a grey screen, and that was all it would do after that point. It wouldn't go back to the text again, so obviously something else is wrong. Apparently you need a new PLA chip. That's what the word was online, so you get the right PLA chip to match your machine. There's a couple of different variants, but it's easy to find out which one your machine takes by looking at the one that's already in there. So cover off again. Now this time I'm taking the panel out of the side a little bit because you need a little bit of access to it. The chip is quite a way down now and I can't quite reach it without taking out these plastic plugs, separating those two halves there, which I spent a lot of time putting together earlier on. Pull the circuit board up a little bit. I'm not pulling it all the way out because it's a little bit hard to get it out properly. Obviously we're going to have to unplug some of these cables, but that's not such a big deal because they just go back in one way up. Now the chip I need is the second one down. You can see I've got the little chip extractor tool around that. You can use other things to do this, but these are worth picking up if you don't want to break anything. Now remember, of course, chips go one way round, so remember which way round it was. If you drop it that way, you're going to have to pay attention beforehand. But then I've got my new PLA chip, which is supposed to just be a direct replacement for that one. So again, line it up with the socket on there. The great thing about the SX-64, with it being a sort of older one, pretty much most of the chips that you need to mess around with are socketed. So once we've got our chip in, we can put the power back in, or the wires or whatever, connect everything back up the way it was before. Careful not to bend any pins, of course, get those two things flush together as we had before. And now we can switch on and see if we've got our text back that we had before. And yes, it's come back. So the PLA chip was definitely dodgy. And apparently these chips overheat, and it's quite common for them to overheat and die. Although I've still got that flickery text. The text is there, everything's working, but it's flickery. Now let's move across to the PAL machine for a minute. Let's just look on the other side. This one just has that sound issue. So let's go and fix that. Now I'm used to messing around with chips. I went and got a new SID chip. Apparently, just like the PLA, the SID overheats and dies. So I ended up getting a new SID chip. They're not that expensive. I mean, if this thing gets your entire machine working, it's worth, what, $1,000 for some of them. It's definitely worth putting that in there. So again, this is the PAL machine, same innards as the other one. Take the board out again, just get it into the position. Now this time the SID chip is the one above the PLA, so we just pulled that out with that same tool. Push our new SID chip back in again, reseat the circuit board, plug it back together. There's a bit of a theme going on here. Switch it on, and let's try and load a game up on it. So at this point my SD card reader was still in the post. However, I've managed to get hold of a game on a disc, so we can also test out whether the disc drive's working properly on this one. So we can load up the game, and as you can hear, we have sound. So this PAL machine effectively is now perfect. Everything is working fine on it. So let's put some heat sinks on, because there's the issue with those PLA and the SID chip overheating. I don't want to have to replace them again. So it's recommended, even if you've just got a working machine, everything's fine, put heat sinks on the PLA and the SID chip. Now I've got a simple kit here which has adhesive heat sinks rather than messing around with sort of glue and stuff. It just seems simpler to me. So you clean off the top of the chips in the machine, put the adhesive pad onto the heat sink, take off the plastic cover off the back of that, and then you put that into the machine. So a bit hard to show this from the angle that I'm demonstrating at, but basically just putting it on top of the chips. They're not exactly straight, but it doesn't matter, it's just to get heat off them. So put the wires back in there, and our PAL machine is now perfect. No need to mess around with that anymore, other than perhaps we might need to do something with a keyboard cable, but we'll do that one later. Right, so we can put this one together. So I've now got a fully working machine, so that's great. That's what I wanted to start off with. The other thing we have to do now is go back to that US machine and try and get that one working, because we've got the issue on that where we've got the flickery graphics that aren't quite displaying properly. Now we could have just left it at this point and said, well, we're fine, we've got a PAL machine, that'll do. But I quite enjoyed messing around with these, so let's bring the NTSC machine back in, the US machine, and try and figure out what's going on here. Look at the graphics on that, how they're sort of flickering. Once you get in the game, sometimes it's hard to even see what's going on. It just turns into a load of mush. Now, I read up on this one, apparently that might be the RAM chip, the video RAM chip. So this is a little bit harder, quite a bit harder. We have to take out the same circuit board again, but this time we've got to get it all the way out, which is a bit of a struggle, to be honest, because there's a power cable sort of holding it at the back. I've got my new RAM chip here, which, as you can see here, cost me £3.24. So if that works, well, that's a bargain for fixing an entire computer. Now, the RAM chip is below the SID, below the PLA. It's that one at the bottom there. Now, unfortunately, the chip we want to take out is soldered in, which means I'm going to have to desolder it so I can put this one back in its place. Now, I bought myself a new soldering iron because my old one I think was a little bit cool. It didn't quite do these jobs when I'd tried it in the past. I'm terrible at desoldering. I've watched some videos online, as you do, just to try and get an idea as to how to do it better. The last time I did it was sometime in the 1990s, and it was successful. I managed to replace a chip in a satellite receiver so that my Astra box, instead of getting 16 channels, could now get 48 or something, but that was the last time I did it. Anyway, I've marked where the chip is there. Apparently you're supposed to solder up the existing connections, put some more solder on them so that then it comes off easier when you heat it. Now, I read all the things about not putting the heat on them too long, alternating between one side and the other. I saw a lot of people seem to clip the chip out with a little sort of snip the legs off and things. Now, I did that. I think that was a bad idea. That made it a lot harder for me to get all the little pins out. But in the end, I did it. As you can see, it looks awful. And at this point, I've got a really good feeling that I've completely damaged this circuit board and it's not going to work. And remember, I didn't even know if the RAM chip was the fault in the first place. It was just a suggestion that I'd seen and it might be the problem. Anyway, put our new RAM chip in here. And not too bad soldering things back in. It's just desoldering's a bloody nightmare. I don't think I want to do that again. Bit of practice, maybe I'll get better. So solder that one back in. Look at that, beautiful. What, you wouldn't know anyone had been there, would you? It's like it's brand new out of the factory. It's an absolutely terrible job, that. But anyway, we'll put our cartridge in. We've got that now. We've got our disc here, and as you can see, we've got the screen on, and if we load it up, yeah, it's working. Surprise to me as well. It was the problem. The RAM chip was the problem. That little chip, replacing that, we're fine. Well, until the disk decides it doesn't want to load the rest of the disk. So let's try and figure out what's going on here. Again, reading up online, apparently the disk reader head thing can get kind of gunged up. It has a sort of grease on there that gets thick and stops it moving about, so it'll read part of the disk like mine did, but not the other because it can't get the head in the right place. So I cleaned off the existing grease with IPA, isopropyl alcohol, and then I used some sort of fan oiler, which I've used in other things for motor oil and things. It's just a good oil, I think, for stuff like this. So putting that on there, you can see it's moving a lot freer now. You could feel it with your finger. It slid up and down a lot quicker, and now it was able to load the disk. I didn't really need it loading disks. It was just me trying to get everything working. I can use it off that SD card reader if the disk wasn't working, but everything on this is now working fine. So that was a real success. Again, we're going to put heat sinks on this one. We're not daft. We know that the PLA, the SID overheat. Everything else is working fine, so why risk it? Just put a heat sink in there, put it all together, and we're done. Well, nearly. We've got the issue that we've only got one keyboard cable between two machines. Now, you wouldn't think it would be such a big deal getting hold of one of these. All those people online selling all the different spares for Commodore 64, SX-64s, whatever, they don't seem to sell these, which is a shame. I'm surprised as well. I thought someone would have something that worked just like this. It's just a normal parallel cable, 25 pin. Well, there's a couple of pins missing, but it doesn't matter if you use more pins than there are there. It fits in a 25 pin socket, put it that way. But you can see here is a normal cable, just too big. There's just too much going on with a normal parallel cable. You'll also find that most people selling them online sell really long cables because they're designed to attach to a printer. Now, I managed to find this one, this ribbon cable, which looks a little bit more hopeful. It's a male to female cable, and I'm going to have to cut those little wings off there so it fits in. So I'm getting the sort of Dremel type copy here just to cut the edges off that. And as I did so, I thought it might hold together, but no, the front falls off, so I don't suppose we need that, do we really? Let's just tidy off the edges of this so it's got a sort of rounded edge, no sharp edges on there. Plug that into the existing port on the underneath of the machine, and then the other end, of course, is a female, and that's a female as well. So we're going to have to do something to join those two things together. Now, I couldn't find a ribbon cable that was male to male, a short one, but stick that on a normal parallel cable, one end on there, one end on the keyboard, and again, that works fine. Now, I tried it another way, cutting one of those parallel cables down a little bit. It seemed to look a bit neater on the outside, but I was a bit afraid that it's sort of bending the socket a bit. But regardless, it does work. I'm still looking for a better solution, something that I can use that looks a little bit more like the original cable, but it doesn't matter. At the moment, everything is working. I've got 2 fully working machines from starting off with 2 faulty machines. I've now got my SD card reader as well, so I'll be working my way through those various games and demos. Now, the demos don't work with the card reader I've got, some of them, so I'm going to have to maybe install a Jiffy DOS and do other different things, but it's all going to be fun trying these different things out. I'll tell you one thing that isn't fun is this game. I always remember it being hard, but I don't remember it being that hard. Now, if you notice any flickering on the screen, that's just down to different frame rates and things between the camera and the NTSC and PAL versions of the screen. And obviously you wouldn't really want to try and play something like this on a tiny little screen because it's a little bit hard to make out what's going on. But let's go back over what we've managed to accomplish here during this video. So we had issues with the graphics cutting out and the keyboard being unresponsive, and that was just reseating a board. Then it went blank, so we replaced the PLA. We had one with no audio, replaced the SID. Flickering images, that was the hard bit, desoldering and putting that new RAM in there. Disk loading errors, pretty simple, just oiling that disk drive up. And a no keyboard cable, well, we made one of those, and of course we have put those heat sinks in, which I'd recommend everyone does if they've got an old working Commodore 64 or SX-64. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. It's just been me messing around trying to repair a couple of things while I've been stuck in the house for 2 weeks because I'm not allowed out. I've had an operation or something, I'm not supposed to meet anyone, so it's a perfect opportunity to sit in the house, mess around with some old games for a couple of weeks and a soldering iron. But that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.
Oh no!
What's up now?
I was just watching a video and it's been set to private.
So?
I had a very important comment to make, but I can't do it now.
So, just watch a different video instead.
I've seen all the other videos.
You've seen every YouTube video?
Well, I don't watch the Minecraft videos, so that doesn't leave an awful lot left.
Fair enough. So what are you going to do now?
I'm going to wait here until it's made public again, and then I can finally post my important comment. I think this F5 key's broken.
Right, well that's it. I'm off to bed.
Stay up! Only me!
Have you been here all night?
Yes.
Well, I'll catch you later because I'm off walking dog down to canal.
Ah! It's back! It's back! It's working! It's back! I can finally post my comment! Oh! Oh, well, it took a while, but it was definitely worth it in the end.